Welcome to the You Are a Force podcast channel, your go-to space for real stories, fearless dreams, and unstoppable women rewriting the rules. And the force behind this podcast. Here is your host, Binoli Botadara.
Hi everyone, welcome to You Are a Force, the podcast where we celebrate women who do not wait for the seat at the table, but they build a new table, open the doors, and create opportunities for others to also follow. I'm your host, Binoli Botadara, and people say that in the city of London, which runs on the capital, but when you look very, very closely, this towering glass ceiling and the cold data actually realizes that behind every great institution, there are right people. And my today's guest is an absolute center, has been on the defining decisions and for 21 years, and she has been actually in the corporate finance with Morgan Stanley to global giants like McKinsey, and also worked very closely in the very senior positions at JPMorgan. And she invested in becoming an entrepreneur, founding member or founder of Sapphire Partners, one of the UK's most leading executive search firms. And it is my absolute honor to have someone who actually has earned that impact in the city of London. She has been as 2024 City Dragons Advisor of the Year, and she is also a commander of the Order of the British Empire. She is received by His Majesty the King Charles III for her outstanding contribution to business and leadership. So her insights have been cited in 10 books. Famously also, she has shattered a 300 years old glass ceiling by shortlisting a first ever woman to be shortlisted as a candidate for the governor of Bank of England. So before I actually dive into this exciting journey, I really would like to thank someone who has been a true inspiration. So thank you so much for being here, Kate, and let me welcome you to this amazing podcast where I can't wait to dive into the world of Kate Grussing. Kate, thank you so much for being on You're a Force.
Binoli, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here, and you have already interviewed so many amazing people. It's I'm flattered to be in your lineup and really look forward to the conversation.
I have been dreaming about this since a long time, and that's why I rehearsed the introduction twice, but I still made mistakes. But the thing is that, when someone is someone like you who sits in front of you, who is a super achiever, there is a tendency to actually make mistakes because that initial aura is so powerful. But I'm genuinely very glad to be sitting in front of you. So uh, Kate Grussing CBE, welcome on You're a Force. So Kate, I want to start from the top and I want to start from the beginning. You grew up in the US and you have the dual nationality and constantly bridging the cultural landscape between the US and the UK. So before we dive into everything what you have done, I want to understand how your childhood was like, and did you have any extravagant dreams of becoming a doctor or an astronaut, or you had a complete different life philosophy of becoming a lifeguard?
Well, to be honest, I thought I would grow up to be a senator or a congressperson, or
Really?
maybe to run for higher office.
Okay.
I moved to a suburb of Washington, D.C. when I was 6 years old, and so grew up being interested in how change happened, what the role of government was.
Mm-hmm.
My father worked for the Department of Agriculture, and my mother worked for the University of Maryland. So I was fascinated by the role of our elected leaders at an early age, although I was a lifeguard for many summers.
I love that because I'm sure in the DC, almost everyone works who works for the government, so it rubs on to you, right? And maybe your father's genes also would have inspired you. But then you spent your early career at an absolute peak of the hard, quantitative corporate power, navigating the intense M&A transactions at Morgan Stanley. And then you also solved puzzles at McKinsey by being a part of the strategy consulting. and also in the JPMorgan. So I want to ask that when the management consulting is so deep in strategic design and the long-term frameworks of the organization structures, the massive shift is a mindset, right? So when you look back, how did you navigate landing in those amazing competitive roles, apart from, of course, being good at what you are?
Well, I guess coming out of university and then business school, I wanted to keep learning. I wanted to have impact.
Hmm.
I wanted to work with other smart people.
Hmm.
I wasn't ready to say, all right, I'm only going to do one thing for the rest of my career. And so I saw them as great building blocks.
Hmm.
And certainly when I started life on Wall Street, it was incredibly exciting and interesting to be close
Hmm.
to um, the center of power for finance. But I increasingly got interested in how the different banks were differentiated. How did their cultures differ? How did their
Hmm.
strategies
Hmm.
vary? Because
Hmm.
on paper, Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley or Merrill Lynch all had pretty similar strategies.
Yeah.
So my time at McKinsey was fascinating to use the other side of my brain, to look at in greater detail, to be more forensic and trying to understand what the differences between companies were.
Mm-hmm.
And at the top of companies, I was fortunate to be exposed to the board members and CEOs and CFOs or heads of strategy. And so
Hmm.
again, it was really inspiring to get exposure to individuals who were charting the course and
Hmm.
taking their organization to perhaps be the most dominant in their field by acquiring a competitor or becoming more focused by selling off a division. And so those sorts of big strategic transactions I had exposure to in my time as a M&A junior.
Mm-hmm.
In my time at Morgan Stanley, uh, was, I'd say, more of rolling your sleeves up and
Hmm.
thinking about, well, after you've completed an acquisition or divestiture, then what happens? How do
Hmm.
you achieve the revenue synergies? How do you make that strategy of consolidation or growth a successful one?
Hmm.
So I felt privileged to have such great early foundational roles in my career, and they gave me exposure not just to the tools of whether it was financial analysis or strategic analysis, but also exposure to individuals who were
Hmm.
really big brains when it
Hmm.
comes to either raising capital or helping to develop a strategy and the tactics.
That's amazing. I love that. And I genuinely believe that the opportunities don't come your way. You have to identify that. And I love when you started with the Wall Street. I'll show you something. So I have this. So when I went for the first time to New York, I think I was a child, and I saw this every girl walk in the high heels wearing this typical brown bag, which I had no idea what that was about, but they were running literally on Wall Street and those streets. And then I went and I asked everyone that what bag was that, and it was a Louis Vuitton. And so I ended up buying my first bag with my first salary, which I collected. But yes, the Wall Street has a different charm, and it actually pushes you in a different light altogether. But also I genuinely believe that if you are at multiple right places at multiple right times, then only the doors open, because no one really gives you everything ready. So I'm sure you must have done a few things right to actually land up those roles as well, because in that very place in Wall Street, in all these big brands, there are so many people who are actually trying to take your seat as well. And being a woman, I'm sure in those days it must have been very tough.
No, no question. You had to work incredibly hard. It was essential to have really good grades coming out
Mm.
of university and then business school. I had to practice and do lots and lots of interviews, so much as you said at the very beginning of this podcast, how you practiced it twice. Doing that homework is essential, whether
Yeah.
you're a 22-year-old graduate or a 40-year-old banker.
Mm.
So I worked incredibly hard trying to identify why my skills would be a good fit,
Hmm.
thinking about what the different entree points were. So I did benefit from on-campus recruitment coming out of my university,
Hmm.
and there were women a few years ahead of me who had gone to my university who were incredibly generous and provided practice interviews and would do phone calls in advance to help you work on your shtick and why they were interesting places to work. So I think at any stage of your career, it's really essential to do that homework and
Hmm.
understand what a particular firm or role requires, so that
Agree.
you're also being really realistic.
Yes.
And I know many individuals who were interested in going into strategy consulting, but who unfortunately didn't have the academic grades. So
Hmm.
they had to be more creative in thinking about what firms they might join or what roles they would go into.
Hmm. Hmm. No, absolutely, absolutely. And yet, after 21, no, 21 years before, yet at the peak of your career in all these amazing brands, you left to start your own company, and which is Sapphire Partners, and which is so fascinating that because entrepreneurship is really glamorous on LinkedIn or from outside, but and you shifted from allocating the financial capital to analyzing human capital, and that's really fascinating. So, what was the catalyst that gave you actually the courage to take that risk?
It was a hard decision, no question. And I'm awfully glad I had 20 or so years of experience before I set out as an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I had a supportive partner. I had young kids, but a little bit of money in the bank. I had a strong Rolodex or contact book, and I wanted to have more impact.
Mm.
And I wanted to try to be a force for good in thinking about how the firms I had worked at in the city could better recruit in a more diverse way.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew so many amazing men and women, but especially women,
Mm.
who might have taken a career break or a mommy track role or a sabbatical or not come back from maternity leave. And I knew how incredibly talented they were. And some of them had
Mm.
been, very senior partners at law firms and consulting firms and managing directors at banks. And I saw what I thought was a great market opportunity.
Mm.
So it was a bit of a leap. I'd say it absolutely has been incredibly rewarding,
Mm-hmm.
but it's been a lot of hard work. And
Of course.
financially, I probably would have been materially better off by staying in the city. Um, I am fortunate that I'm driven by more than just financial returns.
Mm.
But no, I have met so many individuals who say, "Oh, I thought about starting up a business, or I thought about doing something like Sapphire." And so I had been a pretty risk-averse, cautious person before.
Mm. Mm.
And so I would encourage individuals to pursue their dreams or to be entrepreneurs, but there's definitely a lot of pre-work that needs to go into it, and you need to think about your family finances and your
Yes.
stage of life, and is it at a stage where, for example, your partner can help pay the mortgage or the school fees, because starting a
Mm.
business typically will take much longer and be much harder than one might expect.
I agree. And if you don't try, then how do you know whether you'll succeed or not, right? My mother always says that if you don't ask, the answer is no. And if you don't try, you would never be able to succeed. So if you try and fail, you can always take a U-turn and go back to the city and or maybe Wall Street and start. But I'm so glad that you did. And you're also very realistic about it, that there were no rosy days or because just like any other entrepreneur, initially setting up a business is like growing a baby. So you have your hard days, sleepless nights, everything. And I want to pick your brain on very, very important topic, which is very close to my heart, which is diversity and inclusion. So research at McKinsey shows that certainly the organizations which have diverse leadership, they outperform financially. But yet, for the largest part of our careers, we have seen it's treated like a checkbox exercise. It's changing. So when you started Sapphire in 2005, like 21 years ago, even at this point in time, I think that diversity and inclusion is still a debate and a topic to discuss, unfortunately. So 21 years ago, it must have been a complete different ballgame altogether. So I want to pick your brain when you would, go and talk to these people for helping them place the right candidate. Did you have those conversations which were tough enough? And how did you actually navigate or phrase your commercial and economic value of a person, not by the gender, but also by the capabilities?
No, you're absolutely right. So 21 years ago, there was far less research on the topic. It was much more revolutionary,
Mm-hmm.
and intuitively it makes sense.
Mm,
And most senior business leaders like to work with a really wide range of people.
mm,
And we've all observed whether it's football teams or orchestras or business teams, and if everyone's playing the same instrument or role, they're rarely going to be as successful. So I absolutely approached it with a commercial lens.
mm.
I knew I didn't want to come across as a bra burning feminist. I was approaching this with my financial and business skills.
Mm,
And that's where Sapphire very much started by targeting the sectors I knew well, where I had worked. And the challenge is it's easy to analyze financial statements.
mm,
It's much harder to analyze the performance of an individual on a team.
mm.
And it's even
Okay.
harder to analyze someone in an interview context. So while there are fabulous psychometric tools that might tell you whether someone's introverted or extroverted or task-oriented or creative, how you actually quantify that impact
Mm,
in terms of a particular team or a seniority of a role remains more art than science. So I definitely had to um, work on communicating this and
mm,
trying to sell it and explaining why companies would benefit from recruiting more diverse senior leaders. And, I knew that it would take a considerable investment of time and energy in order to help make that case. And there would always be some clients or companies that really weren't interested and gave it lip service.
mm,
But I concentrated on companies where I thought there was a senior leader who was really enlightened,
mm,
or where they were in an area where they really would benefit from greater diversity. There's a reason, for example, that mining companies haven't particularly been a big um, client of firms like Sapphire's.
sure.
But on the other hand, they're changing too, and there are more senior women in mining companies than ever before. Whereas banks and consultancies and law firms have been recruiting in a
Mm,
diverse way for quite a long time. And so those
yeah.
fabulous, more diverse men and women who have joined have now climbed the ranks and are in the most senior roles.
I love that. But I was just thinking that, right now you have earned that position and name in the market and in the industry where you can say something about a candidate and a hiring manager or a company would take you on a face value. But when you must have started at that time, 21 years ago, when you were building your own credibility or rather the name to reckon with, not that you knew them, but I have encountered so many headhunters and so many people. They just want to not argue or challenge the hiring manager, because whatever they say, they try and identify exactly the plug and play candidate. And so I'm sure that, because that requires so much of confidence, A, to begin with, and B, also you have to take it with a plunge that even if I lose this opportunity to, fill up this role, it is going to be a loss in the economic terms, but if you would be able to place that candidate, you would be happier than ever before.
No, you're absolutely right. So it's really important for a search consultant to have the courage of their convictions. And that really comes with having evidence. So, I've met very many impressive senior leaders who might have terrible CVs. And I've had to get to know that senior leader and realize they've just put together a bad CV. Maybe they've been at the same firm their whole career. And a rubbish CV doesn't mean that the individual behind it isn't super high quality, and vice versa.
Yeah,
I've met
yeah.
many senior leaders who have the most incredibly impressive CV, and then the person standing in front of me is really underwhelming. So, as a search consultant, I have to get to the bottom of what makes this candidate special, what makes them tick, what stands out about them. And it's an incredible privilege to help companies recruit their future leaders, as well as to help leaders find the role that's going to hopefully catapult them to new levels of seniority and impact and influence.
And double clicking on that, which is actually something which I have experienced, that LinkedIn data actually tells us that the average corporate job opening, the moment, especially in times like this when there are more candidates looking for roles than the opportunities, so roughly there is one application which gets put up on LinkedIn, and there are average roughly 250 applications per opportunity, and only 4 to 6 candidates ever get to the round of interviews. So that's quite bizarre. And that is literally 2% survival rate. So how does an applicant can actually beat the ATS system when they do not have a privilege to, be with someone like you? Uh, how do you actually get to the seat of interview as well, being that 2%?
That is such a good question. I wish that there was some secret sauce that I could share. Um, you know, LinkedIn roles typically will be advertising junior or mid-level roles, and the algorithms are looking for typically individuals who can tick the right boxes.
Yeah.
And so that's where your CV has to really be tailored to that opportunity. And if you haven't had the directly relevant experience, it's going to be very hard for you to fit into that box. Looking at the words and the criteria in the description of the opportunity is super important. So you can consider if you can tailor what's on your CV. Most individuals don't have everything they've ever done in their CV
Yeah.
because their CVs would be far too long. So I do see a lot of individuals who don't do enough to go back and relook at their CV and think about how to update it or modernize it, or what skills that perhaps they took for granted 5 or 10 or 15 years ago, now they need to brush up or add in.
Yeah. And sometimes you don't really know. So I got my job at Reliance Asset Management over a cold email. I sent a cold email to the CEO of
Wow,
Reliance,
amazing.
and he replied to me and he said, "Come and meet me." And I went and met him. And I used to work for life insurance before. So no one was giving me an opportunity at asset management, because everyone's like, "Great CV, amazing sales experience, but you don't have the market experience." And I'm like, "How will I get it if you'll not give me an opportunity?" Right? And I don't like to hear no as an answer, being in sales.
Well done.
So I sent a cold email and I went and met him, and I could convince him to take a plunge on me. And I was completely honest that I will pick it up. I will learn. I will do all the hard work. I don't know much about the markets, but I'm excited. I don't know what he saw in me, but he gave me this opportunity. And I did not tell anyone. Everyone in the company thought I must be some big shot's daughter. But when I came to LBS, and I just happened to tell this to a professor, and she said, you should go and talk about this to almost everyone because everyone doesn't do it. I was like, really? And like you said, there are so many things in your CV which you know that would have an impact, but you don't generally talk about it. Or stories like this. Now I've started to talk about it, and everyone's like, oh, that's amazing. But I used to feel shy that how can I say that, I did a cold email or things like this. So you never know what actually can work in that particular moment. And if you know your strengths, I think you should highlight that, isn't it?
No, your example is a great example, Binoli, and I would definitely encourage individuals to try that. Now, the challenge might be that CEO may get hundreds of emails and applications.
Yeah.
So he may not ever see it. Now, his assistant might,
Hmm.
or he may forward it, or his assistant may forward it to the HR department.
Yeah.
All of those are good outcomes. So
Yes.
it's important to think about who you approach within a company so
Right.
that you do get the best opportunity to get in front of them.
Yeah. And he actually told me that I've given your example to my daughter who is 16 years old.
Wow, wonderful.
So yeah, so I was like, oh, that's quite. I mean, I was doing it in with the mindset that I'm not going to get a reply, right? I did not think of the best outcome because I used to think that what do I have to lose? I'm going to give it a try. But
Absolutely.
but yeah, it it worked out really well. But if someone right now listening, Kate, appearing or planning to appear for the life-changing interview next week, what is that one thing they must highlight? What is that one thing they must avoid? And any psychological levers they should use to actually make it unforgettable in that interview?
I think the thing to highlight would be what you're really good at. What's your superpower?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a list of 10 things.
Hmm.
So you should lead with your strengths and your achievements. And then you'll be talking also from a position of confidence.
Hmm.
I think the one thing to avoid in that very first interview would be flexibility and pay. There's a time for that, but not in that very first interview. You
Okay.
need to first make sure, is there a fit? Does my personality align well with the culture of this company? Do my skills
Hmm.
make sense?
Hmm.
And if you're too focused on pay and flexibility in that very first meeting, you're putting the cart before the horse.
Hmm. Okay.
And remind me of your third question.
The third point is any hidden psychological levers you would recommend to actually pull to make it look unforgettable.
I think it's really important to be a good listener.
Hmm.
So, when you're asked a question, make sure you answer that question.
Hmm.
Um, what you're listening to might be a quizzical look from the person on the other side of the table. It
Hmm.
might be a little bit of a frown.
Hmm.
And so having the confidence to say, you know, I'm not sure I answered that properly, or is there something that might concern you? And if there was one thing that worried you, Mr. Interviewer, about my candidacy or
Hmm.
my fit, what might that be? And so
Hmm.
I do think being brave in picking up on any cues
Yeah.
and doing your best to answer the questions that are thrown at you.
Hmm. So basically, reading the room is equally critical. Sure. And you have interviewed thousands of leaders, Kate. What qualities consistently separate who become the CEOs from equally intellectual and intelligent people? So, what is that one or couple of qualities you think that the most powerful executives have, and what are the biggest mistake people make because you've had the front row seat to all these glorious people?
I'd say the qualities that I've seen really set people aside would be a small number. First, an incredible drive and tenacity. So seeing through a merger or a new product launch or a difficult divestiture, that drive to achieve
Hmm.
is essential in an astronaut or a CEO.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'd say secondly, you have to be really organized and efficient. So, being organized and efficient includes knowing how to delegate, being able to prioritize,
Mm-hmm.
realizing you can't burn the candle at both ends all day, every day,
Hmm.
um, and triaging, much as they do in an emergency room. Thirdly, I think you have to be a great communicator. You have to be able to sell your talents. You have to be able to sell the company to your investors. You have to be able to sell the opportunity to potential employees.
Hmm.
And that doesn't mean you have to be an extrovert, but you
Yeah.
have to communicate why this is a great firm
Yeah.
to either invest in or join, and why you're a great person to work for.
Hmm.
Um, and uh, the fourth would just be to persistence, really um, to work hard, not to give up,
Hmm.
to give it your best, to always do your homework.
Hmm.
And so you have to really persist because it's a very competitive world, whether you're at JPMorgan or a McKinsey or a fintech that's just
Hmm.
getting off the ground. So
Yeah.
that I'd say those would be the four things I would emphasize.
Okay. Okay. That's amazing. I'm gonna keep a note of that. But something very, very profound, which while I was doing the research on you, which, stuck with me, that the Bank of England has stood at the heart of the British financial system since 1694, and in more than 330 years, over 120 governors, it has never had, or it has never have till now, a female governor. So when Sapphire Partner was appointed to lead the search for the governor of Bank of England, you helped shortlist a first woman, to at least be considered for the role. That, in a way, sounds bizarre to even talk about a shortlisted candidate. But imagine the irony that we still haven't been successful to appoint one. So take us to the inside that room, what really happened, and why do you think women aren't even able to obtain that particular role so far?
So I'm hugely optimistic that we will have a female governor of the Bank of England in the not too distant future. And let's be really honest. The women haven't been working in the most senior ranks of central banks um, for more than the last 20 or 30 years.
Hmm.
And there are going to be very, very few individuals who have that combination of expertise from economics to monetary policy to leading a big organization to being a great communicator to
Mm-hmm.
being able to manage the politics and the
Hmm.
profile and the media
Hmm.
scrutiny. Women weren't even allowed into the PhD programs at most of the top universities decades ago. Now, the good news is that has changed, and
Yes.
women now are really well represented at the junior levels of most central banks, and certainly
Hmm.
at the Bank of England. I felt hugely privileged to play a role in that search. It was the first time the Bank of England had ever used a search firm, in fact.
Hmm.
So unfortunately, I need to go to my grave with my, the inner workings and the secrets of who was on that short list. But suffice it to say that I felt great that Sapphire was able to help widen the aperture and to look at a breadth of candidates who brought deep insight into banking, financial services, economics, and that the work that we did in 2019 will be hugely beneficial for the next search of the Bank of England's governor.
I love that, and more power to you for doing that. But just being very cheeky, that how did you manage to actually be appointed as the consulting firm or the headhunting firm for Bank of England? I'm sure there must be many others who must be competing against you as well.
We had done a number of smaller, less high-profile searches,
Okay.
working with the Her Majesty's Treasury for important committees at the Bank of England, and they had been impressed by our professionalism and the quality of the candidates we had helped them recruit. And so I think that helped us tick the hygiene box, that we were a safe pair of hands. And my colleagues and I did a lot of pre-work researching who would be the potential candidates, looking at other central banks, looking at the lower ranks of economists and deputy governors. So we went to that pitch meeting with a really well-researched set of concept candidates. And I knew as a smaller search firm, we had to distinguish ourselves by coming to that beauty parade with great ideas. So we were up against some of the biggest search firms in the
Exactly.
country.
Yeah.
And I also think the fact that Sapphire is a real leader in promoting diversity and looking for candidates who aren't just the usual suspects will have helped us too.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it did. And I mean, it's so inspiring actually to sit in that room and pitch and compete against the largest players in the country and, create that impact with your USP and your research and being authentic, true to yourself, basically. And in 2023, you were appointed as a Commander of Order of the British Empire, better known as the CBE, one of the United Kingdom's highest civilian honors, and recognizing for your outstanding contribution to business and leadership. So, for all the listeners, the international audience, what does that actually represent? What does the CBE mean? If you can share with us. And can you take us through that moment where you actually received the phone call or you got to know that you're going to be awarded? Because you got it at the Windsor Castle and received from His Majesty the King. So, can you take us through that moment? Because I'm sure it must be pinch me moment.
I'd be happy to. It was a huge honor. So the CBE sits at the top of the three main civilian honors. A CBE stands for Commander, and it's awarded to individuals who have played a leading role at a national level. The next level down is called an OBE, which is an Order of the British Empire. And that's for someone who will have played a distinguished contribution in a specific field. And then the level below that is an MBE, which is for outstanding achievement or service to a community that has had a major positive impact. So the CBE is the level below where a damehood or a knighthood. So I had been working, I'd say a lot of what I do at Sapphire, doing my executive search work, is very much behind the scenes for a very long time. But I had played a role encouraging other search firms to pay more attention to diversity. And so I think my work as a thought leader certainly was helpful. And there's no question, having been successful on the search for the governor of the Bank of England gave me a level of prominence or credibility that my prior searches for corporates and financial institutions and partnerships hadn't given me previously.
Sure.
Um, and as someone with this funny North American accent, it was an even greater privilege. I'm very proud to be British, and I think it's wonderful that Britain provides these honors for
Hmm.
individuals who've had an impact that goes above and beyond their day jobs.
Mm, love that. And how was the experience of receiving the honor at the Windsor Castle? And how did you even come to know that you
Uh,
won that?
I'm sorry, I didn't answer the question. You get a letter in the post.
Okay,
It comes in a slightly big envelope and it's on heavy paper. I think the back of the envelope says something like Her Majesty's government,
okay.
saying that you've been nominated and are you minded to accept it. And it's typically a secret process. You don't know that you've been nominated. You
Oh,
don't
wow.
know who has testified on your behalf. And so, for the vast majority of recipients, it's a really wonderful surprise to know that
Mm-hmm.
your work has been recognized. And it's quite a long, lengthy process.
Hmm.
So, unbeknownst to me, those checks and evidence had been going on behind the scenes for a few years before that letter arrived in my
Really?
post.
Amazing. I love that. Oh my God. I got chills all over my body, and more power to you for doing that. And it's so inspiring to actually contribute in whichever career you do. You don't have to be in the army or, be like that extreme doctor or any of those things. You can do your regular work and still be so powerful and impactful. So that is so inspiring, Kate. Thank you. And I want to pick up on something which is the FTSE Women's Leaders Review points that out of 300 and FTSE 350 companies, only 43% of the positions, board positions across are women. That also we know that there's a mandate to have like one woman on the board. So when we actually go underneath that layer, about 8% of the CEOs are just women, and there are more Johns in the FTSE 350 than women. So we are moving into the era of AI-driven recruitment processes and applicants tracking, the human biases and also standardized evaluation. So I want to pick your brain on, from your vantage point, do you agree that the AI would amplify, the biases we have right now, or it is going to be a boon to actually turn this around? So from 8% CEOs, we can have almost 28 or 38% soon.
I think the honest answer is the jury is out. And the main reason we have so few female CEOs is that we don't have enough women in P and L roles.
Mm,
So we need women running big businesses
yes.
and climbing through the ladder within their companies. So, in the past, you would get a role as a graduate or a new hire at a junior level by
Mm-hmm.
having applied directly to a company,
Yeah.
maybe through the graduate round coming out of university, maybe going on that company's portal.
Mm,
And, there's no question AI is going to be filtering
mm,
applications because most big companies get far more applications than they can ever possibly review.
yeah.
And we know that AI has inbuilt biases. So the
Mm,
good thing is we know that.
yes.
And we need the users and designers and developers of that AI to
Mm,
be really alert to what those biases are.
mm,
We need more women, for example, coding and developing that AI.
yes.
But all of us in our daily life need to be using AI more and
Mm,
getting better at using it to our advantage and getting experience at it and not complaining about it, but um, being proactive, taking courses in AI, understanding what the AI is looking for so that um, you can be proactive and do your best to stand out.
mm. Ankit, you have been frequently advised ambitious professionals to have or establish their own independent board, which is incredible because I also learned at London Business School how critical it is. But majority of us, we don't know how to appoint that personal board, which can be beneficial to our careers and ourselves. So, if I can pick your brain and if I can ask for your advice, how to build that personal independent board which can actually be beneficial to our personal brand?
I think at different stages of your career, you need different input. And so I would encourage any man or woman to think about who are those individuals that have inspired you? Who have you had exposure to that you want to work under?
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think's been really successful blazing the trail in the area you'd like to work in? And whether you're looking for a mentor or a sponsor or someone for your board of directors, it's all about getting good advice.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it might be tough love that you need to go back and fill in a gap in your experience. Sometimes it might be, a bit of feedback about something that you didn't do as well as you could have. And
Hmm.
so the sort of advisors you need when you're 24 are likely to be different. Let's say when you're up for partnership at a law firm when you're
Yeah.
34.
Yeah.
So that ideally they're individuals that you have a connection with, where
Mm-hmm.
there's a warmth or a chemistry.
Hmm.
Um, and it should be a reasonably sized group of people. Your board of directors can't be 20 people
Yeah.
because you can't possibly keep up with them. And likewise, there'll be a stage where you'll say, Jenny was a great supporter of mine when I was up for vice president at the age of 29.
Hmm.
But Jenny probably isn't in a position now where she can help me as much. And so you're not necessarily firing Jenny, you're
Hmm.
just going to nurture new supporters.
Yeah. New Jenny.
So
Yeah.
being really dynamic and thinking about, I really need to develop my sales skills.
Hmm.
And, I don't have enough exposure to the sales team. Who do I know? Maybe it's someone from my university, or maybe it's a cousin or a former colleague. And so trying to be quite strategic in thinking about where you're going to get that advice.
Hmm.
And, in an ideal world, it also needs to be reciprocal. It needs to be someone who um, you can inspire and who has the confidence in you, because the last thing you want to do is be nagging them to get a date in their diary.
Of course.
And
Yeah, and that's so true. But then I want to double down on that, that if that is so important to actually, tap these unknown sources or people who you think could be helpful. So it starts also with the networking, right? So someone who do not know anyone in, say, moving to a new city or if you want to navigate into a new sector, how do you how do you start a networking? How do you get to know these people? Someone who you know you can be having them on your personal board, but the new people who can be helpful as a sponsor or mentor, how do you find them and what are your advices for networking?
well, that's why I think it's really important that you're curious, whether it's reading the trade press or going to conferences in your sector,
Hmm.
certainly reading the newspaper or blogs, following individuals or groups on LinkedIn. There are hundreds and hundreds of networks,
Hmm.
whether you're an investor, whether you're a structured finance lawyer,
Yeah.
whether you're a sustainability professional, whether you're an M&A banker. I could go on and on.
Hmm.
And so, I think being quite targeted is important, because you can't invest time in dozens of networks.
Hmm.
As a young person, probably one of the most important pieces of advice I give someone is you have to get good at something. And so maybe you've started your career in a particular area and realized actually there isn't enough growth here, or I'm not never going to be especially good at this. Then also,
Hmm.
being confident enough to make that hard decision and pivoting. I know a lot of individuals in the past would go to business school as a way to make a career transition. They
Mm.
also would go to business school in order to broaden their network.
Oh,
So you can do both, or you can do neither.
yeah.
But no, you do sometimes have to go out of your comfort zone and maybe, connect to someone on LinkedIn that you've read about in a trade rag or a newspaper and
Mm.
say, I saw your article. I'm really interested to learn more. Would you be open to have a phone call?
Mm.
Or can we connect on LinkedIn?
Mm.
So I think you have to be proactive
Yeah.
and not expect your network to grow and strengthen unless you invest the time and energy in it.
Absolutely. And who you know in life is more important than what you know. And I totally get that. And I want to pick one more thing on that, that once you know people, still when you apply for job interviews, people want plug and play majority of the times. And I always tell everyone that if I've sold lipstick, I know how to sell nail polish, but people do not want to take chance, and because the hiring manager also want to go for safer choices, because again it's demand and supply, multiple reasons, implicit biases. How do you break that perception that you bring something different, so you stick to your USP, which could be beneficial to the business, but also that someone would take a chance on you?
Well, I think you have to share the evidence. You have to convince them, here are the 2 or 4 or 6 reasons why I have the capability
Hmm.
or the potential to be good at this. And sometimes you might be able to convince an employer to try you on a project or an interim basis,
Okay.
but also, you could go away and write a thought piece on something.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, After an interview, I would regularly encourage candidates to follow up. And in that follow-up, explain, here are the points that if I'd had more time, I might have expanded on. Or
Really?
in retrospect, here are some questions I've given further thought to, or this is how I would approach it. So you have to, what's that saying? Show a little leg
Hmm.
and um, demonstrate your insight and
Hmm.
why it's relevant to that particular role and opportunity.
Love that. I'm gonna do that. I usually sometimes prepare a presentation, like a 2, 3 slides, just to identify that, how I can add the value to the hiring manager. Sometimes they don't like it. They're like, oh, this is too much. But I'm like, oh, you're not gonna give me a chance otherwise also. But I would at least, prepare that and go and showcase that, okay, I've done my research. And before I wrap up, I want to ask one more question while I'm just being greedy. That if someone aspiring to be on board of from FTSE 100 companies to also small companies, where do they start to actually be on board? Because ultimately it's a great opportunity to contribute to the businesses and have that portfolio of careers as well.
I mean, the starting point needs to be what your executive experience has been.
Okay.
So, in your case, Binoli, where you've been working in distribution and fund management, right?
Yes.
That's what you know and what you're good at.
Mm,
So you're not going to be a strong non-executive director on an oil company
yeah,
board, for
sure,
example.
sure.
Now, as a young professional, when you might be juggling a family and a really demanding job, I would always encourage individuals to think about what could you do in a voluntary capacity? Could you be on the board of a local school or a charity or your church?
Mm,
Now, that's not going to get you a footsie role,
sure,
but it will help you understand what the role of a board director is.
right.
And it will help you start to develop that skill set
Mm,
um, because, typically in your 30s and 40s and even in your 50s, your executive career will take up the vast majority of your time and energy, and
Hmm.
jobs are very greedy in that way for good reason.
Sure. Sure. No, perfect. I love that. And last but not least, every woman who is listening today, if you were to give one piece of advice, what would that be?
Be brave.
That
So
sums up.
what whether it's asking for a promotion or putting your hand up for a special project, or maybe it's an international move, or maybe it's being able to work a little bit more flexibly. But we know that um, too many women can often suffer from imposter syndrome,
Hmm.
and I really want to encourage ambitious professionals, men and women, to be brave and to take the initiative.
Love that. And before I let you go, I'm going to ask some rapid fire questions. Whatever comes to your mind, just bring it up. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Say yes.
If you were to meet 16 years old Kate today, what would you tell her?
It's going to be a fun ride. Put on your seatbelt and make the most of each day.
One book you would recommend everyone should read.
Can I have two?
Of course, you can have three.
I would say Working Identity
Hmm.
by Professor Emilia Ibarra at London Business School. She talks about networking and reinventing yourself. The second book would be The 100-Year Life by Professor Linda Gretton. And she talks about all the different chapters we're going to have in our careers. And number three probably would be Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. And I see too many women and men leaning out. So it's a little bit American, but I think there are some pearls of wisdom in it.
I love that. And I'm so fortunate to have studied under Armenia and also Linda Grattan as well. So Armenia did our OB classes because I did the Sloan Masters. She's incredible. And her books are also incredible. Daily self-care routine you would swear by.
Brush your teeth. Uh, no, just I little things make such a difference. So I do think I'm always encouraging my kids and my colleagues to smile. And obviously what you do is very serious, and I want people to take their jobs very seriously. But remember to smile.
And it lightens anyone else's day as well, right? Anything you would say not to say during the negotiation of salary?
I think it's negotiating salary is important and hard, and most people don't like to talk about money. But you need to be brave and know what your market value is.
Mm-hmm.
But you also need to be realistic.
Yeah.
And the package is what's important. The hours, the location, the benefits, what you're going to learn, what the trajectory is, not
Mm.
just the number.
Yeah, sure. Any community or network you recommend to be a part of in this city, being a woman?
There are so many. I'm hesitant to recommend just one, but I would really encourage individuals to find a network that speaks to you, that has
Mm.
individuals you can learn from. It's important to network with men too.
Mm,
Um,
of course.
so
Yeah, very
definitely
important.
ask for recommendations. And I'm active in quite a few networks, and they've also changed over time.
Hmm, sure. What gives the visibility in front of a headhunter? Because for a headhunter, there are millions of applicants every single day they meet.
I think being really clear and communicating, here are my strengths. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I wouldn't consider.
Hmm,
And having an updated CV and LinkedIn profile, and replying quickly to emails, and not wasting anyone's time, not leading anyone on. If you're, in a great job and you never leave, then please don't flirt.
Yeah, sure. If you could change one thing about today's recruitment process, what would that be?
Oh, that's an easy one. I wish candidates got better feedback. And that is twofold, right? I need my hiring managers and I need other headhunters to be really rigorous in sharing that feedback. And often the feedback is not shared because people don't take the time, but often it's also not shared because um, they don't want to hurt someone's feelings. So as a candidate, it can be really hard to know what you could have done differently, why you didn't get shortlisted. And so I feel terrible when I can't give proper feedback to a candidate. So yeah.
More than 80% of the people ghost you, basically. They just don't want to tell anything. But that's really rubbish. And last but not least, what does force mean to you?
Leaving the world a better place, having an impact, trying to be a force for good. So with Sapphire, that's what I'm trying to do, one search at a time.
Wow, amazing. On that note, Kate, thank you so much for sharing your journey, and thank you so much for giving us the front row seat into the rooms where the history is made. And your journey reminds us that the careers are not are not just built by chasing titles, but also earning trust, making bold decisions, and also quietly opening doors, not just for yourself, but also for others. And to everyone listening today, just like Kate, you are a force too. So challenge the status quo. Say yes to those opportunities. Talk to strangers before you need them. And until next time, keep opening doors, keep lifting one another, and stay powerful. Thank you.
Thank you, Binoli.
Thank
It
you
was a
so much.
privilege.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to You Are a Force. Hit subscribe and join us next week for more powerful stories from women rewriting the rules. Until then, keep building, keep leading, and remember, you are a force.